Welcome to all participants in the room and online. I hope you've had a good evening and that you're full of vigor and vitality to face the last part of our symposium. The last part, but not the least, because it is the time where we will pay heed to the results of the last 2 days of the discussion. Before starting, though, I have three messages of public interest. First, the WeClap tool that you have seen on the screen with the QR code is still operating. You can use it to continue to make comments and ask questions. Second question, somebody forgot his or her booklet. If you want to take some notes regarding the roadmap, very important. And third, if you want to see the results clearly, well, somebody forgot his or her glasses. This being said, we will start. And I will invite the co-chair, Mr. Koulibaly, to come up to the stage, and I will ask him to present the main elements of the symposium. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, hello again, and welcome to this closing session here in Quebec City. I have the great privilege to try and summarize the highlights of these 2 long days of very positive discussions. It's almost an impossible mission, as we often say, but I'll do my very best. For 2 days, we have talked about the technical roadmap. We have talked about the efforts that we dedicate to how we can use better biodiversity in the agricultural world. We have talked about the constraints, the opportunities, and the challenges we're facing. We have talked about policies at all levels that favor conservation and utilization, sustainable use of biodiversity for food and agriculture. We have talked about value chain and the importance of a diversified food and nutritious food coming from the land. We have talked about the necessary link between consumers, producers. We have talked about shared benefits. We have talked about commitments, about policies based on pilot projects that are carried out throughout the world. We have talked about the lack of funding for biodiversity, but mainly we have presented our experiences, very rich, diverse, really close to the ground, led by our organizations. We want to maintain our landscapes, diminish herbicides, support transition to bioecology, and to maintain traditional agriculture. Through these experiences, we have shown that we are there to lobby on these very important question of maintaining biodiversity for our food and our agriculture before those who make decisions. What is very decision also is that we came from 39 countries. It's almost like the United Nations here. 39 countries here represented. But what was mainly mentioned is that for once, there is a very strong participation of farmers. I think farmers should applaud now. We are the one who maintain this biodiversity. So it is very important when we have such discussions that we are part and parcel of it. So this has to be underlined. It's a very important participation. We have had very passionate discussions and very constructive. I think there was no contradiction, basically, no opposition. And diversity and the richness of our experiences was something quite visible. The expertise from farmers, practitioners, non-benefit organizations all got together. So at the end of these 2 days, we can be proud of what we have done. We have worked on this document, all ever-evolving document. It was updated, taking into account all the comments that we have heard. I think in a minute, Mr. Couteau will present to you this document. And what we have to do is, and maybe this is a request to my peers, farmers, but everybody else, we have to make this document ours. We have to use it as a tool. We have to bring it up there so it could contribute to our common objective to maintain this biodiversity that has no price for our common future. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Mr. Coulibaly, who has managed to this tour de force of summarizing 2 days of discussions. A very important moment now. François Pitou will present to you the famous roadmap. Thank you. Hello, good morning, as sometimes we say here. As I have said, I have this big responsibility to present to you the technical roadmap as it has been worked out on the basis of the discussions that we have had these past 2 days. Would like first and foremost to say that I would like to thank and congratulate the members of the Pilot 2 Committee, the Gearing Committee. Some have worked late into the night to finalize this document. I think it was sent to you this morning at 9 in French and in English, if I'm not wrong. Anyway, in French for sure. In English, if it's not there, it'll be there very soon. Just before starting, I don't want to have a detailed discussion on the roadmap, but I want to give you an overview of what there is in it. So we'll go back to it at the end of the presentation when we will discuss about the follow-up of this symposium and the necessity to make this roadmap yours. I would like to recall that, as it has been mentioned on various occasions during the opening and also yesterday morning by my co-chair, Geneviève Parent, that the roadmap is not a document, something that is solid. It's there to help us all to reach the objectives, which is to develop a balanced relation between biodiversity in agriculture. I don't want to go back to how the roadmap was set up. That was presented in detail yesterday morning, but I can say that I can remind you that the steering committee prepared the first version that was sent to various experts for their comments. It was put on the discussion platform managed by FAO. And finally, we also tried to integrate all the elements that came out from the discussions that we had in the past 2 days. So the objective here, as we can see on the slide here, the objective is to see how we can facilitate the implementation of the world global biodiversity framework adopted in Montreal, and also taking into account biodiversity in the agricultural world. So what came out from the discussions these past days, after the brilliant presentation by our co-chair, nothing much to add, but there's a major
développé pour la décade internationale de la biodiversité, qui est déjà très ancienne, c'était 2000-2010, je crois, si je me rappelle bien. L'agriculture a besoin de la biodiversité et la biodiversité a besoin de l'agriculture. Et puis je pourrais dire, après la discussion qu'on a eue ces 2 derniers jours, on peut même aller plus loin en disant l'agriculteur a besoin de la biodiversité et la biodiversité a aussi besoin de l'agriculteur. Donc c'est vraiment pour montrer l'interdépendance.
So this really shows the main interdependency.
So I wanted to show the link between agriculture and biodiversity. The importance of a sustainable regarding sustainable development in general, agriculture and food
is
central
at the very
center
to sustainable development.
Sustainable development.
So we sometimes forget about the aspect of food, and you all remember. And so we place agriculture at the middle with the different sustainable development objectives. So if we're not able to, how should I say this, advance toward transformation toward more sustainable agriculture, then it's very difficult to achieve all the objectives.
Et des producteurs, pas seulement dans la salle, mais aussi comme intervenants. Et puis, je crois que c'était toujours pour moi un point extrêmement important, mais c'est bien évidemment très difficile pour les agriculteurs à s'engager, surtout au niveau international, parce que souvent, l'agriculteur a autre chose à faire que de passer quelques jours dans une salle. Et je crois que ce qui est important, c'est justement la reconnaissance du rôle crucial qui est joué par l'agriculteur, mais aussi les autres acteurs du secteur agricole. Alors que je viens d'Europe, vous savez tous qu'on a vécu au cours des derniers mois des mouvements agricoles relativement forts, et je pense qu'un des éléments importants, c'est justement la reconnaissance du rôle que jouent les agriculteurs et de l'importance qu'ont les agriculteurs. Et puis, le dernier point, je pense, qui est aussi important, c'est pas non plus quelque chose de nouveau, mais je crois que les interventions au cours des 2 derniers jours l'ont encore une fois confirmé, la nécessité d'une forte collaboration intersectorielle. Alors, peut-être qu'on pourrait relever, peut-être une faiblesse qui a déjà été relevée par certains. Dans la salle, peut-être un groupe qui manque, c'est un petit peu le secteur privé, qui était pas très représenté. Peut-être qu'il y a certaines personnes, mais je pense que, voilà encore, si on veut stimuler le débat, il faudra peut-être s'assurer la prochaine fois qu'il y ait une meilleure représentation du secteur privé, aussi bien en amont qu'en aval de la production agricole. Alors, quelques considérations aussi qui sont un peu ressorties. Ce qui était là, c'était la diversité des acteurs qui sont impliqués dans le processus. Quand on parle de biodiversité et d'agriculture, on a beaucoup parlé des agriculteurs, mais il y a aussi toute une autre série d'acteurs qui sont importants. Et aussi, quelque chose qui est important, au sein des agriculteurs, il y a une forte diversité, hein. On entend souvent parler d'agriculture, mais l'agriculture, ça n'existe pas, il y a des agricultures. Et ça, c'est aussi quelque chose qui est extrêmement important. Le deuxième point, c'est la nécessité d'avoir une approche holistique et puis aussi de tenir compte des échelles spatiales et temporelles. J'aimerais peut-être juste relever pour moi quand même un élément qui était très illustratif, c'était dans la présentation sur les systèmes alimentaires durables. La présentation par, j'ai maintenant oublié son nom, l'agriculteur du Québec, qui a montré que où il était aujourd'hui, ce n'est pas le résultat d'une année ou deux de travail, mais c'est le résultat de toute une vie. C'est le résultat de 30 à 35 ans. Donc, les changements ne se font pas en quelques années, mais c'est vraiment de l'investissement sur le long terme. Et bien évidemment, la cohérence avec les objectifs du développement durable, je l'ai déjà mentionné aussi, et puis les engagements sous les conventions cadres des Nations Unies, et puis aussi le fait que si on vient au cadre global sur la biodiversité, c'est l'interdépendance des cibles, hein. On a parlé des cibles particulièrement pertinentes pour l'agriculture, on a démontré qu'elles étaient vraiment toutes interdépendantes, mais c'est exactement le même cas avec les autres cibles qui ne sont peut-être pas directement focalisées sur l'agriculture. Alors peut-être juste maintenant sur la feuille de route technique, donc les composantes, les trois éléments qui ont déjà été mentionnés. Donc je n'y reviens pas, je vais essayer de passer élément composante par composante et essayer d'identifier quels sont les éléments importants qui sont ressortis de nos discussions et qui sont maintenant, qu'on essaye maintenant de refléter dans la feuille de route. Alors sur la mise à jour des connaissances sur la biodiversité pour l'alimentation et l'agriculture, c'est bien évidemment pas une liste exhaustive, c'est des éléments qui sont particulièrement importants et je ne vais pas les lire tous, hein. Ils sont là sur l'écran pour ça. Je vais peut-être juste revenir sur un qui, à mon avis, est très important, c'est la question des indicateurs. Et on en a discuté à plusieurs reprises, l'importance d'avoir des indicateurs qui soient simples, qui soient bon marché, qui soient facilement utilisables et qui permettent à tous les acteurs aussi, notamment de pouvoir évaluer la pertinence et l'influence des mesures qu'ils essayent de prendre pour atteindre les objectifs qui se sont fixés. La question des indicateurs, elle n'est pas nouvelle, elle a toujours été présente au cours des dernières années. Ce qu'on observe souvent, c'est la tendance à avoir des systèmes extrêmement compliqués qui sont simplement inapplicables dans la pratique. C'est très bien, je dirais, sur un plan académique, vous avez l'impression de couvrir tous les aspects, mais simplement, c'est inapplicable. Donc, il faut essayer de trouver un équilibre entre faisabilité et pertinence. Le deuxième point, c'est l'adoption de pratiques agricoles durables, respectueuses de l'environnement. Ici, vous avez une liste des thèmes qui sont abordés dans la feuille de route technique. Peut-être juste un point qui a été mis en avant ici, c'est la question de l'analyse des coûts-bénéfices, qui est vraiment un élément aussi vraiment vital pour justement promouvoir la mise en œuvre et le développement de certaines mesures.
In order to support certain measures. There are risks also. There is a very important element to mention, the way you implement this objective of reduction of risk linked to inputs. It is very much dependent on the production of certain production systems that you have and that you use. There again, there is no recipe, there's no one-fits-all solution. constraints and opportunities that we have to face. We have the necessity of valuing the expertise of farmers and local communities and indigenous communities. Second point, that another element that we don't mention very often, it is a good income for farmers. The farmer should draw from his or her work an income that will allow them to live well, decently, and to invest in the future. It is the discussion of the farmer and the value chain throughout the chain. These are themes that are being developed more and more at the international level. And as you may know, it is difficult to talk about, but they are key. We have to find answers to these questions. If not, we cannot reach the other objectives. We have other elements here that were mentioned, the leverage role of consumers and other actors of the food chain. Policies and national instruments for sustainable development, this is what came out. That is what came out in the action plan and the roadmap. So we have the question of harmonization and coherence of the political frameworks. We talked about climate, biodiversity, desertification. We talk about global instruments, but also for not only in terms of agriculture, but also in terms of health and nutrition. How can we make sure farmers can participate? So the whole question of participation of farmers, the political support also in the implementation of the objectives, visibility of programs, and the whole question of access to funds. And also the fact that it is important to have coordinated actions. So we should avoid the silo approach. In terms of policies in each country, so I'm going to talk about the national level here. There is one element that came out from the discussions. It's important to work at the local level and the implementation of all of this, especially in countries such as Canada. Switzerland, of course, is it's less appropriate, but it's still the case. But because even in small countries, you have, especially with a federal structure such as the one we have, it's important to work at the local level. The second question that is also of great importance is the question of access to the land, and also the question of the new generation. How can we put into place a framework whereby the young generations can also start an operation, an agricultural operation? Also, one essential issue is the question of administrative simplification. In Europe, one element of great importance is that it is not possible to spend so much time to fill in the forms. The farmer is there to work, is not there to spend time in front of his or her computer. And also what came out of some discussions, the more you go towards sustainable systems, what we see is that the administrative task increases in order to have access to there's too much administrative task linked to all of this. It doesn't make much sense, really. We should have a simplification of when we want to be more sustainable, it has to be more simple. So this is more or less what I can say to give you a good idea of the roadmap. So the objective here is not to open up the discussion and go back to the content quite clearly. We can always It's the roadmap is not a document that is linked to a certain group. It is a worker group that is there for all actors to be able to use it. All actors who want to go towards a more sustainable agriculture, more compatible with biodiversity. The idea is to take what is of great importance with respect to the work that you do, with respect to the organization of where you work, but clearly also we have to have the possibility, if you see certain elements that you'd like to mention, the roadmap is there. If we want it to have an impact, it must be adapted to the needs of every actor represented here, the actors of the whole agro-food chain. There. So, right. That's it for my presentation. Maybe we should try to do now is to dedicate some time. How can we make this roadmap ours? We'll do that twofold. First, a series of presentation. After that, we'll have a little bit of time for a final discussion before concluding the whole process that will be made by my co-chair, Madame Parent. But I will leave the master of ceremony, our master of ceremony, to come up to the podium now. Thank you very much to our co-chair. He has shown why we needed this roadmap, and he gave us an overview of what it has, what it proposes. I would like to remind you that the roadmap, it is now online. You can consult it. And so now that we have heard Mr. Pitou, we'll have a panel who will be discussing about the roadmap and its implementation. So I would invite the panelists to come up to the podium, please. I cannot see them all, but I do hope that they are all there. So, Braulio Ferreira de Sousa Diaz, are you there? Eliane Ubalijoro, she's there. She is the Chief Executive Officer for the Center for International Forestry Research and World Agroforestry. And she is the Chief Executive Officer also of ICRAF. Kent Nagozi, Secretary for the FAO International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture.
Isman Ilwafi, Executive Managing Director. I always have a hard time pronouncing this acronym, CGIR. Is that what it is? Janice Bailey, who is the Scientific Director of Quebec's Nature and Technology Organization. Lloyd CD, who is Director General of the Inter-American Agricultural Cooperation Organization. And the last name I have on my list is Mr. Marcel Groslo, a farmer and president of UPA. And this part of the morning session will be chaired by Mr. François Pitou, co-chair. So as you can see, it's really my day. So I wish to thank all the panelists for having made themselves available. I think that Braulio will probably arrive a bit later. So then we'll switch around the order of the speakers. You have 8 minutes. I've told that you received 3 questions to cover. So first of all, a short presentation of your organization, or introduction, that is, and then a general reaction to the technical roadmap, especially for the participation of farmers, which is the central issue of the symposium. And then finally, the question on my last slide, which is what follow-up to give to this roadmap and how to follow up in your organization on the content of this roadmap. So we start with Ms. Eliane Ubali-Joro. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of FAO and the Convention on Biodiversity and Université Laval and the Government of Quebec for this event, which comes about 18 months after the COP15 in Montreal, where I had a chance to participate. And I find it's a very important action in biodiversity, particularly to make sure that when we look at the representations of agriculture on greenhouse gases and the importance of climate change, why is it important for us all to be working in the right direction to really carry forward the actions for agriculture around the planet? So I find that it's very important to consider the protection and conservation of biodiversity, especially in the most vulnerable areas that really have tremendous interest, especially for forests and critical ecosystems that are really very important. As we know, about 8 billion people in the forests, a large number of people rely on forests for various services, food, and so on. So this interface between agriculture, forests, and other sectors represent a major issue for us. ICRAF, which is the International Center on Agroforestry, or CIFOR, as it's called, as existed for 45 years, is based in Nairobi, and CIFOR, based in Indonesia, that has existed for 30 years, are two centers where I've had the pleasure to work. And a year ago, I moved from Montreal to Nairobi, and on the way, I went to Jakarta on my way here for this week. So for me, it's really a connection that I make. I was in Montreal during COP15. I moved in April to Nairobi, and now I'm coming back from a retreat with my team in Nairobi to talk about how we can accelerate the work necessary for between now and 2030. So CIFOR ICRAF, if you're not familiar with the institution, we represent offices in 9 countries in Asia, 14 in Africa, and offices in Brazil and Peru. And we find it necessary, particularly the interface for farmers, local businesses, and private industries, and how we work together collectively to make a commitment toward actions that are going to raise the intersection of food security. It's very essential to the work that we do. So it's important to be able to set out areas of protection and to take into account the viewpoints of indigenous peoples and local populations for the work that we do. And we also commit to work at 3 levels to have actions with a high carbon and biodiversity integrity, and also integrity as regards the actions of local populations in community development. So the work that we're doing now is really essential to be able to see what is the interface between these spaces in the area of agriculture, forests, forest management, management of urban areas, cities, and also what we call rangelands. So the interaction between all these different spaces and their interconnections. So it's important to understand that the management of these systems works or doesn't work for biodiversity, and to understand what interventions help in making biodiversity improve and the management of these actions. It's important to have indicators that enable us to understand the many ways we can measure biodiversity. And also it's important to have a very clear idea of the costs and benefits of the interventions, taking into account the effects of biodiversity. And also it's important to include effects on production because it's important to take action to make sure that revenues are protected and also biodiversity actions at the same time. And for us, it's really what we call a very knowledge-intensive action. So how can we get the collective intelligence together with this agenda to make sure we have a critical impact? And as regards the roadmap, what we see in C4 aircraft, the important thing for us is trees. How can trees be an entry point for multiple benefits? As I mentioned, we have a combination of 75 years of experience integrating products, agricultural products and forestry products. And we do research since then, really to try to break down the existing silos and to be able to combine protection, restoration, and sustainable management. And indeed, what we see is that the synergies make it possible to really work in the area of collective spaces in a much more effective way, but clearly well integrated. Protecting primary forests, for example, as regards buffer zones, is something that we consider very critical to reduce the vulnerability and degradation that exists. As we know, 1/3 of soils on the planet have degraded. 65% of that soil has degraded, in particular in the continent, where the population will double between now and 2050 in Africa. We have soils that are healthy and critical, and the One Health concept is very important because when we look at soil health and the health of humans and the health of wild animals and domesticated animals, all those interfaces are important. And to us, soil health at C4 aircraft is a very important aspect where issues and trees have a remarkable impact. We know that as regards increasing the number of trees in agricultural ecosystems reduces erosion by more than 50% and increases carbon capture by more than 20%. So how we work at the interface between forests and agricultural land represents a critical aspect for sustainable agriculture that takes into account the mosaic of different landscapes. As regards restoration, we have a principle, which is that we have to make sure that we have the right tree growing in the right place for the right reason. And we have to consider productivity and restoration and utilization of local species to the maximum. We also know that to ensure sustainable and effective agriculture, some of the spaces where we also have to look how we make sure that pollination, water, and ecosystem services provided by nature are taken into account. And to us, introducing trees on farms is a very important space where we see a great deal of things that can be done to connect forests, agriculture, and nature as we go towards cities as well. Thank you for listening. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this presentation, and also thank you for reminding us about the importance of the role of trees. I also noticed something that is an important aspect, which is in the roadmap, which is the issue of soil and the importance of soil health, and also the role that can be played by the use of trees. Now it is my pleasure to give the floor to Kent Nagozi, Secretary of a Phytogenic International Treaty.
Thank you very much. Thank you already. Yeah, it's Kent Nadozi. Yeah, the D. The Secretary of the FAO International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. First, before I start my remarks, I'd like to thank the government of Quebec and the organizers of this event. I think it's well put together, and so I've seen it run very smoothly so far. And I know that it wasn't easy in the background, but it seems so easy how smoothly the thing had evolved and progressed so far up till now. I think one of the major aspects of this gathering is the broad spectrum of actors and stakeholders that are brought here, and more predominantly the farmers. Of course, you have the research institutions, the international organizations, and government policymakers. But I think the presence of farmers makes it quite unique in a way that they are the ones that actually, do a lot of work that is the basis of our existence. So we cannot just, I think they've been so far neglected in the, range of activities and discussions that are going in the international arena. So I think that our whole existence depends on the work that they do, and such that any problem, any issues, any threats to the farmers themselves and the work that farmers do is an existential threat to humanity. I think we should make that connection and touch it as a basis for our discussions. So the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture was negotiated under the FAO. It was recognized at that time, when the Convention on Biological Diversity was agreed on and adopted, that the agriculture sector had very specific issues and needs when it comes to access to genetic resources that needed to develop new varieties and crops to meet new needs, but also the conservation needs of this sector is also quite unique, and the dynamics of the actors are also different. So the treaty was negotiated to address those issues. First, the objectives of the international treaty and the convention are similar. The three main objectives: access to genetic resources, conservation, sustainable use of genetic resources, but at the same time, this treaty focuses on food security and sustainable agriculture. That is the unique thing, because it addresses the needs and specificities of the agriculture sector. In terms of conservation, it was recognized that we're losing diversity at a great pace. A lot of the crops and varieties that used to be cultivated previously are being lost at a very fast pace. And then within crops themselves, the genetic diversity that we have with them have narrowed so significantly that we face a lot of threat to our, to our survival, really, because the loss of any variety, no matter how, simple and isolated it is, we're losing opportunity to adapt and to face new challenges that we're facing, of course, the climate change, land degradation, and all of that threats we're currently facing. So as we lose the diversity, we lose the capacity to cope with these new and emerging issues. So that's one of the things that the treaty provides and works for. And we work very closely with the CGIRs as well, because they hold very, very large collections of genetic diversity, and they ensure that genetic diversity they hold are not just museums, but are also used for the purposes of developing new varieties for use and for our sustenance, and also for other industrial purposes. There's also the benefit sharing, ensuring that those who contributed in maintaining and in sustaining the diversity also share in the benefits that arise from it, most importantly, the farmers. And the international treaty is the first international agreement to recognize and to provide in a legally binding agreement for farmers' rights. And I think that's one of the things that countries should be looking at. And one of those particular rights that farmers have and are recognized is the need to create political space for them to engage in the decision-making at the national level on issues in particular that affect them. And that is very, very, very critical, apart from the working on protecting the knowledge that they have and promoting that knowledge and ensuring that they take and share in the benefits of the development and that arise from the use of genetic diversity. So more broadly now, going to the Global Biodiversity Framework, which forms the basis of our discussion here today. Yeah, I think that has become the framework and the call for action, the template call for action for the global community to address the issues of challenge and the challenges that we face when it comes to biodiversity in general. I would use I would say metaphor of, you have a scaffold that is used for building. It provides that scaffold that every sector, every segment of society, every aspect and every actor can use to address issues that they are, that they are facing in their own sector, and contribute to addressing that, the main issues that have been identified in the framework itself. One of the unique things as well of the new framework is the fact that it includes the agriculture sector significantly. Because previously, the agriculture sector was not really taken into account in some of the discussions that go on in the environment sector in developing such frameworks and global instruments. As someone said yesterday, I think my sister from Jamaica said that if you're not at the table, you are on the menu. So agriculture had been on the menu of the environmental discussions as a culprit, as the bad person, as the as the basis of the problems that we have in that area. But clearly bringing them to the table is something that's quite significant and important for us to ensure that they bring what is good for them. The fact that agriculture is the largest user of biodiversity by sector, even though it makes a lot of impact as well, they should be there. And we've been talking about mainstreaming agriculture, biodiversity in agricultural sectors, fisheries and forestry. I think there's a two-way thing, that we should also talk about mainstreaming sustainable agricultural production in biodiversity and environment discussions. Because that is, for them to fully understand and taking advantage of the lessons and the knowledge and the resources that the agriculture sector brings to ensuring that we fulfill those goals, ambitious goals that are established and set up in the framework. So going further, I think the roadmap that was has been developed here is quite commendable. No doubt about it. It takes into account a whole lot of people, and then the input from the different sectors makes it quite comprehensive and wide ranging. But one thing I would advise is that, as Francois had mentioned in his introduction about simplicity, I think it's very important to have a short version that all the stakeholders can easily zero in on. We don't expect the farmers, who are busy, doing a lot of work, to come and look, read through, 10, 15-page document as an implementation work. If you can provide a very brief, to the point bulleted, version of it that they can really zero in, and then maybe refer to the major document if the need arises. But I think it's, the basis for that is already, in the document. And one of the major areas that is quite critical, the issue of research and development, having the research community to work with farmers. And when I talked about the two-way flow between agriculture and environment, that also applies when you have farmers, research community, policymakers as well. We talk about the farmers as if they're the ones who should be receiving awareness raising and capacity building. There should be reverse capacity building, where the farmers build the capacity of stakeholders, of policymakers, of researchers, because they know it. They are the ones in the front lines and the ones who are dealing with these issues in real time, and in the real life. So they have a lot to bring to the table, and that should be part of the process, that they bring that knowledge and we use it to address the issues, rather than sit in different capitals and make policies without taking into account the real practical aspects of the work that they do at the local level. And to also facilitate the work they have done, I think that part of it is also in the roadmap issue of incentive measures to ensure that they are fully encouraged. We've seen the cost. We look at the value chain. The farmers receive very, very minor, very small proportion of the value that is created from an end product, and that is where they should be able to benefit fully from that process. And collaboration, partnerships, and and collective action is quite significant, and that is what is demonstrated by this gathering here today, given the range of stakeholders that have participated and contributed to the roadmap. And I think it's for us now to take it forward in every forum that we have, to our own special institutions, sectors, as well as our own institutions. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Kent, and sorry for misspelling your family name, but since I know you as Kent, it's easier. And thank you also for the presentation. I think what I take is also the example of the treaty being developed as a tool to address the specific needs and issues of the agricultural sector. That's exactly what we are trying to address during these 2 days, is how to address the specific issue and needs of the agricultural and food sector when it comes to the implementation of the global biodiversity framework. And the second point that I find quite very important is the question of simplicity. So really to come with something which is simple. It's not only the indicator that needs to be simple, but it's also framework. Mais alors, merci beaucoup. Donc, nous allons continuer maintenant. Je propose.
Thank you very much. So we'll continue. So I'll give a bit of time to Brolio to get ready, and I'll give the floor now to Ismahan Alouafi, Executive Managing Director of the CGIAR. Thank you very much. Thank you, Francois, and good morning, everyone. So let me start by thanking Université Laval, the government of Quebec, and also the SCBD. So we need to pull together all these themes because often we talk about biodiversity and we talk about agriculture and we talk about climate change, but we are in a sense putting these divisions on ourselves. But in nature, nothing is separated. Whether it's species, it's not just that one tree or one animal or one microbe or microorganism. It's really nature as a whole. And so the coexistence of species. And we as humans are very much responsible for what goes on this planet. And to me, it's very important. So I really thank you for pulling together agriculture, biodiversity, food security, and all that. So for those who are not familiar with the CGR, it's the largest and oldest institution in research in agricultural systems, and it's been there for 66 years. Some of the centers have been there for 50 years, but nearly all of them were created in around the 1960s and 70s, and the most recent was in 1980, which is FOA. And what does this group do? Actually, this group is a group that does research in the South and for the South. And we have 15 centers. Eliana talked about C4 ICRAF, and the other centers were created initially on a commodity basis. For example, in Mexico with wheat and corn, and in the Philippines, there was another one, and agricultural zones and tropical zones, and we have a center on water in Sri Lanka. But after that, through the years, we also have recognized that it's not sufficient to work on one commodity group or one agroecological zone, but rather we have to work across the ecosystem. So the CGIAR has about 9,000 people, almost all scientists, 128 different nationalities. And so we're a bit like FAO in that sense. We're international, but we're also public, and that's the public side that is very important. And what I would like to start with to give you is to say that the difference between the last 30 years and the next 30 years is a very important distinction. In the past 30 years, we have had a lot of famine issues. The Green Revolution helped us a lot. So there are data that show us that we were able to save 1 billion people from famine. There are also data that shows that the research of CGIAR with partners is showing malnutrition for 3 to 6 million children per year. So it has a huge effect, but we approach it differently. We do it so that we have increased the inputs in agriculture, and it was necessary perhaps. This is what we know how to do best. Heading forward over the next year, from the 1990s to 2022, we did it this way, and we have started since the Green Revolution in the 60s. So now, from 2020 to 2050, do we have to do the same thing? Certainly not, especially with our realization of the interdependency that Francois clarified between biodiversity, agriculture, and climate change, and the fact that we have to survive as a planet and conserve it. So what we have to do, we have to do things differently. So the simplification that Kent and Francois mentioned is a very important one. As scientists and as knowledge generators, we need to simplify things and tell people this is what nature does. We have to explain what nature does, and we have to do the same thing. We have to stop separating things. That's what the COPs do, and so on. They talk to one another, but they have a COP on climate, a COP on biodiversity, but we need to pull it all together, and that's what we do at the CGIAR. We want to pull together these conventions and the COPs together, and of course, we work a great deal with FAO, and we're in the process of doing it. The second point is concentration. There are hotspots everywhere. We talk about biodiversity. There are hotspots that are much more important than others. We talk about climate change. We talk about poverty. There are always concentrations of these hotspots where we really have to map these hotspots and intervene there. Because when you make an intervention in a place where there's a concentration of malnutrition or a concentration of biodiversity, the impact is huge. So with international development, and as chief scientist of FAO, we say in FAO that we want to increase agricultural production by 70%, but it's not true. And I say no, because I understand better it's a generic thing. So what we have to do actually is to increase the production in certain parts of the world, including Africa, including Asia, South Asia. That's where it has to be done. For the rest, they should not do it. And then we have data and publications that demonstrate clearly, for example, China does not need to produce more. Between 2020 and 2050, 2.7% increase in productivity, because they already have pretty well maximized their production. I think you get the picture. Topped out their production. Africa has to increase its production productivity by about 80%, but not on the basis of adding more inputs. It's a question of technology. We need more technology in Africa. We haven't had that in recent years. Kanai Nwanze said that the Green Revolution skipped Africa. So Africa was left out, and in the Green Revolution it was left out, but we have an opportunity now to produce more and more intelligently in Africa instead of producing it somewhere where there are no opportunities. Like Asia needs to increase by about 40%. But the differentiation in agroecology at the continental level needs to give us a way of doing things more intelligently and in a way that recognizes this interconnection. The other thing that I want to say is that in that sense, it's very important to have science. The indicators, the way in which we do our monitoring is very important. For now, for example, we had the credit. That's not very clear, of course, and it worked, but it gave more in northern countries because they were able to create a market with monitoring rather than countries of the south. It never helped the small farmers. So if you have a small farmer and you want them to change, we really have to align the incentive with what we want. The carbon credits. It's not realistic, and that's what we have to do, I think. As scientists, we need to clarify the standards. We need to find a way to do it with the monitoring in a more intelligent way, and we need to bring it forward as an incentive to all farmers.
The farmer is paid for his or her potatoes or oranges or livestock, but also paid for carbon. And if they do something sustainably, we'll pay them as well. So on the perspective, from the perspective of a farmer, as Francois said, the farmer should be at the center. We ask them to nourish us, and the population is increasing, and we put more pressure on them. You have to do this, you have to do that and the other. It's very complicated. So if we want things to be done, the farmers should be really at the center of all of this, and they must be paid for what they do, while the rest of the sectors, we don't ask so much from them. So I think we have a lot of responsibilities as actors, actors who know what they're talking about. We have to come up with a package of solutions that makes sense, and we should bring back the policies, the incentives for a change to happen, because change must be done quickly. And many colleagues have talked about it. Now we have about 821 million persons under the line of poverty, with with 2 degrees more, this figure will go up to 800,000. With 2 degrees more, about 900. 4 degrees more, it will increase to 4 billion people. So we cannot allow ourselves not to do anything. The urgency is there, but science is there too. And the regions with which we have to work are ready to go along. We have irrigation problem, technology problem in Africa. Nothing. These things are granted elsewhere, but why is that so? Because technology is too expensive. So what we must do is diminish the cost, make sure that it is done on the continent, not necessarily important from abroad, and put that in the hands of farmers. The CGA works in about 80 countries, and most of them are in the South. We work a lot with national programs, and often we're just really working with these people. We work with the Ministry of Agriculture, in a research institute, but often what we see is that technologies continue to come from the north, and often they're too expensive. So if we want to change things at a broad scale, we really must think south, hotspot, technology, innovation. We can do that now, and the effect can be multiplied by hundreds if we do that at the right place. Thank you. Thank you very much for this very rich intervention. We are talking not only about good agricultural practices, but intelligent practices also, very important, and also the question of research that must be oriented towards the solutions that are closest to the reality. It's important to implement really what is being developed. The question of the incentives and access of the South to the necessary technology and the good means to go ahead. Thank you very much for this presentation. Now, I will give the floor to Braulio Ferreira de Sousa, their Director for Biodiversity, Conservation, and Sustainable Use at the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change of Brazil. Braulio?
Good morning to all. Let me start with a question. Why do you think our planet has so much biodiversity? Do you know the answer? Do you know how much biodiversity we have in the world? Science tells us we have about 2 million species that were described, plants, animals, microorganisms, etc. But that's only a fraction of the total biodiversity. Most biodiversity in the world is still unknown to science. And some estimates calculate we might have more than 100 million species altogether. Unfortunately, we're losing biodiversity very fast, and probably we will lose much biodiversity before we even get to know them. Why do we have so much biodiversity in our planet? The answer is simple. Potentially, all species could be reproducing asexually without mating other pairs, other individuals. But most species reproduce sexually. This was selected by natural selection. So sexual reproduction means you produce the sons and daughters are different between themselves and are different from their parents. So that's the origin of all this biodiversity, is genetic diversity promoted through sexual reproduction. So we could say, and why is that so? The most scientists agree it's because our planet is not stable climatically, and it's not uniform geographically. Everywhere you go, you see different landscapes, seascapes, and different ecosystems, etc. So to adapt to these changing conditions, geographically and climatically, investing in diversity has proven to be the best solution. So that's nature's answer to this problem. So we could say biodiversity is an insurance to be able to cope with climate change. So if we keep destroying biodiversity, we lose that insurance. Now, everywhere, I have heard a lot of interventions saying that, okay, we cannot take it that farmers are against biodiversity. But at the same time, we have to recognize, and many people have said so, that agriculture is and has been one of the major sources of loss of biodiversity everywhere. So clearly, we need to change the way we do agriculture. Of course, we have a problem because farmers themselves alone cannot pay the cost for this transition. So governments and agencies have to support farmers in that transition. But the farmers have to be willing to change the way they do agriculture. My country is a good example of what not to do. We have huge monocultures in Brazil. Half of all the crop area in Brazil is planted with just one species, soya. That's a species that comes from North China, from temperate climate. And our researchers in Brazil, with support from researchers, especially from the US, were able to adapt soya to tropical conditions. But soya now is planted in the northern part of Brazil, in the limits of its tolerance to heat. And we know our plant breeders are trying to cope by developing new varieties, even more resistant to heat. The problem is climate change models cannot predict the exact climate conditions. They can predict it's going to be warmer. They can predict we're going to have more extreme weather events, big droughts and floods, and we're seeing that. But they cannot say, okay, in this part of the world, we're going to see this kind of weather with less rain, more rain, the rains will be coming later, etc. So it's hard for plant breeders to develop the new solutions for the future, right? So it's a risky thing. And certainly, and we have seen this being proposed by many people, we need more diversity in agriculture at all levels. We need to have more diversity of plants and animals that we cultivate, more diversity in the cultivars, in the varieties of races, more diversity in the cropping systems, right? So, but currently, the main standard is plant breeders want uniformity to facilitate use of machines, to plant, to harvest, etc. They have to be at the same height, etc. So it's all going against diversity. So we cannot go on with this kind of agriculture anymore. And I hope that all the extreme weather events that is happening everywhere will be enough to demonstrate people that we need to change. Right now, the southernmost country, state of Brazil, Rio Grande do Sul, is inundated, a huge inundation, probably the largest in the last 100 years. And people are still continuing with the same practices in agriculture. So we have to change that. Now, let me make an appeal to FAO. I don't think FAO is doing enough. I think FAO is doing lip service to mainstreaming biodiversity in agriculture and to help countries to change the way they do agriculture and livestock. They're not doing enough. And they're the main agency globally to help countries, especially to change their policies and practices in agriculture. FAO years ago asked Brazil that we would need to increase our food production by some 40% to be able to help provide food for the increasing human population. The Brazilian population is stabilized. In the last 10 years, we only increased by 0.5%. But in Africa, in Asia, it's increasing very fast. Fortunately, what FAO has signaled is that among the main food producer, Brazil is perhaps the one that has more opportunity to expand food production. And that is true, because we only use 7% of our territory for crops. However, Brazil has suffered a lot in the past with expansion of agriculture, and we lost a lot of biodiversity, a lot of forests and other kinds of ecosystem. So we have to find a way to increase our food production without increasing this destruction for biodiversity and without increasing greenhouse gas emission. 70% of our greenhouse gas emission comes from land use. And the same is true for most developing countries, right? Brazil has been historically the fourth largest emitter of greenhouse gases because of land use, because of deforestation. So we have to find a solution that allows us to increase food production in a sustainable way with more resilience, with more nutritional value. We have a lot of reports showing that in the past 50 years or more of the Green Revolution, plant breeders and animal breeders have only paid attention in productivity, forgetting nutritional value. So this has to come back to the equation, right? So our solution to expand food production in Brazil is invest more in science, increase productivity, and restore degraded areas, especially degraded pastures, as I mentioned yesterday. So the plan of our Ministry of Agriculture is to restore some 40 million hectares of degraded pastures in Brazil. That's a lot. And they want to restore that for production, for livestock, and to open up new areas for agriculture. So let's hope that will work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Braulio, for the presentation of the specific situation in Brazil with concrete examples. Something I take from your presentation is how do we move from uniformity to diversity in the production system? And the second one is the appeal to FAO. And that's maybe where the roadmap we are developing now could be a basis for responding, for FAO to respond to this appeal. You know, I can say this because like I told to many people now, I'm taking only for me. So I have everything I say, if somebody is unhappy, can only come to me. I don't have a government to represent. But I think that's also an important signal really to recognize the central role that FAO can play at the UN, at the global organization for agriculture, and in the development also of a new approach to respond to this issue. So thank you very much. Maintenant, j'aimerais passer la parole à...
Now I would like to pass the floor to Janice Bellet, head scientist from the Research Fund of Quebec for Nature and Technology. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
I think I'm going to try and speak in English today, this morning. I have written my notes in all kinds of hieroglyphics here in English and in French, and in lots of different diagrams and different colors. And so I will try for our interpreters to be uniform in my speaking. So that's where uniformity is helpful for them. Anyways, thank you so much to the organizers for bringing this fantastic discussion and important world discussion here to Quebec City. I feel very privileged to be part of this, and I would like to highlight just my own interactions over the past months with Geneviève. We would talk every couple of weeks about her plans, and her vision has been very big. And along with her colleagues, Francois and Abrahama and other people here today, I think that she's collectively realized this vision of hers and drafting this roadmap. So I'm scientific director of one of Quebec's research funds. So the province of Quebec, decades ago, designed 3 specific research funds, government research funds. So it's publicly funded research. We fund academic institutions, colleges, universities, and there are 3 of us. So I'm the head of the science-based research fund. There's also one that funds humanities and social sciences, and there's another that funds human health research. Now, the 3 of us together, we can call ourselves the collective research funds. We work very closely together, and we're all partners for this wonderful conference. And I think that just underscores also the importance and the intersectoriality and the complexity of this whole issue and the roadmap that is being drafted. So together, we each we each individually fund our own research, but we do enjoy and have the freedom to work together to fund research that will address, hopefully, major societal challenges, such as climate change or pandemic response, whatever. So we work together, we break silos where we have perhaps clinicians, physicians, working with lawyers and experts in artificial intelligence for something like this. So I think this is the way moving ahead. So the mission of our research fund really is to promote excellence, diversity, and openness in research among scientists in all areas. And those scientists are junior scientists and senior scientists to foster discovery and innovation. About 1/3 of our research funds go to support students and their scholarships. So that concept of succession in science is very important for us. The vision of my own particular research fund is to foster diverse and collaborative research as a catalyst for the well-being, sustainable prosperity, and adaptation to climate and biodiversity crises. For me, it was really important a number of years ago when we drafted this mission that I had the word biodiversity in my vision statement. It was something that even here in Quebec was a little bit new at the time, but it was very important to me and my team that we addressed and recognized the importance of this crisis that we're experiencing right now. So I also want to say something else, that prior to being in this position, I was a professor in the Faculty of Agriculture and Food Sciences at Université Laval for 25 years. And I can say from firsthand experience that historically, in the past decades, at least in rich countries such as Canada, agriculture and agricultural research really has not been very sexy. It's not been sexy science. It's not been very interesting to the general public and to many parts of our government organizations, not all. So I don't want people here to be offended, but I think that people in rich countries really take for granted that we can easily access high quantities of healthy, delicious, and inexpensive food. We don't think about the farmers historically. And also, when the consumers have become more sensitized to climate crises, they've tended to blame farmers. And we have to correct this. This needs to change. And our research organizations, the provinces, the governments, are all helping to change this kind of vision. We can't go down that negative path. So getting back to the roadmap, how do I feel and what have I learned about the participation of farmers in this roadmap? And some of these things I'm going to say today, I've copied copied almost word from some of the speakers, and I didn't always catch everybody's name, so I don't want to take credit for some of these great things that people have said. So one thing that I wrote down and I have here in bold, we need to eliminate the concept that the farmers are the problem causing the environmental change crisis. So that's something that we need to do collectively. We need to remove this weight from the shoulders of the farmers, and we need to facilitate the farmers' ability of being part of the solution. This is where I think research collaboration is really important, where we include academics and farmers to work together. You know, when we think about human health research, it's completely normal that academic scientists work with physicians. We should be doing the same thing also more with farmers. You know, really the key to success for this roadmap is with the farmers. And again, but they can't do it alone. They really need to have proper compensation, and effectively and properly educated consumers need to be part of that discussion as well. Because really, when it comes down to the bottom line, the consumers can really make or break something, and also the media, all that kind of social media, whatever. There's a lot of good information that needs to be shared amongst the public so that they can make good choices. Because something that I always was bothered by, we've all heard this expression, from farm to fork. So in French, it sounds a lot better, I must say. I don't like farm to fork. I don't like de la ferme à la fourchette, etc. I like de la terre à la vie. So from the planet to life, because farming and the food systems is so much bigger than just putting something into your mouth and that's where it stops. Okay, it's so much bigger. We need to have everybody working together to understand how agriculture really affects human health and life. And I think that that's one thing farm to fork I thought was too simplistic, although I really appreciate simplicity myself. Okay, you said you didn't think that farmers have the time and the interest of reading 15 pages of something. Neither do I. Can't. Okay, my attention span is like 3 bullet points. That's about it. Okay, so but still, it's a very complex issue, and we need to work together. I think that I will keep some of my solutions and my other comments for the next round of questions, and I'll stop right there. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Janice, pour cette.
Thank you very much, Janice, for this presentation. What I would like to highlight here, 2 main points: the fact that research in agriculture in rich countries is not very sexy. We have to make it more attractive, and that's probably we can do that through interdisciplinarity. And the second point is what we often say: we compare the model of the farmer alone in the food system. When we talk about problem, it always goes back to him or her, and we have to change this paradigm to go now to the idea where he is part of the solution. What we say is from the fork to the fork to the plate. We don't use the fork very much anymore, but thank you very much for this presentation. Now I pass the floor to Lloyd Day, Deputy Director General from the Inter-American Institute of Cooperation in Agriculture.
Bonjour, buenos días, good morning, bon dia. It's a pleasure to speak to you again. As I mentioned earlier, I represent the Ministers of Agriculture of the Americas from Canada to Argentina. And the way this conference started off, we were talking about food systems transformation. And food systems transformation for me was kind of a funny term that I didn't really like. And about 5 or 6 years ago, the United Nations One Planet Network came to ICA, the home of agriculture of the Americas, to talk about food systems transformation. But they didn't have a single farmer in the audience. They didn't have a single minister of agriculture. And they didn't have I don't believe they even invited the Food and Ag organization or the other sister agencies in Rome. So from that our Director General, an Argentine carnivore, coined three essential elements and premises for how we were going to move forward to talk about food systems transformation, which we would prefer to say food systems improvement. And that is that farmers first need to be present and they need to be the center of attention. And I applaud all of you for talking about that. I think it's vitally important. The second is that science, not political science, not ideology, but science, like the CGR system, needs to be the foundation for public policy. And the third, and it's been mentioned here already, is that agriculture needs to be viewed as part of the solution, that agriculture is not a broken system, that agriculture is a miracle, that we're feeding 8 billion people on Earth today. 50 years ago, it was 3 billion, and people thought we couldn't do that. And we had the Green Revolution, as you talked about earlier. And 100 years ago, it was just 1 billion. So the agriculture has done a fantastic job, but we can do better and we can take care of our planet too, as I discussed earlier. So farmers, all of you have already enjoyed, or maybe some of you are still enjoying, a cup of coffee. That coffee is probably coming from where I live, where Hugo's from, Costa Rica, Central America, Brazil, potentially. That cup of coffee that you're drinking there today, the waiter who you tipped made 25 times the amount that the farmer made. So think about that the next time you buy something. The farmer is not getting money for what he's producing, and he's working hard. He's taking care of his family. He's taking care of all the people that come to harvest that coffee. The payment he makes helps generate an entire community with the externalities of that. So the farmer is important. So the farmer needs to be part of this discussion. Science. So it's been said here, I think someone here just said it, the next 30 years as we move to peak population is going to be the most important 30 years in the history of agriculture. Science is going to help us solve those problems. It's going to help us solve those problems for productivity, but it also is going to help us restore soils, take care of our planet, take care of our waterways. Science is important. Science and agriculture is the intentional modification of plants and animals, and we've been doing it since Neolithic times. We were talking about the founding of the CGIR system. Well, 82 years ago, I have an 80-year pin here for our anniversary, but it was 82, I need a new pin. 82 years ago, Henry Wallace founded ICA. But Henry Wallace, also former Secretary of Agriculture, former Vice President to Franklin Roosevelt, he's also the fellow who sent Norman Borlaug to Mexico to work with plants from Kenya. I know we have some folks here from Kenya, from Australia, from Japan, from Canada, to attack wheat stem rust that eventually led to the Green Revolution and the revolution of science that has helped feed the world. So the CGIR system and all the elements here are very important for that. I mentioned biotech and the importance of biotech, whether it be transgenic or genetic. And one thing I failed to mention, and I think this is an interesting way of describing it, a lot of people don't like transgenics. So there's a scientist named Raquel Chan who founded biotech wheat. Wheat has not had a biotech element, and so its productivity since the days of Norman Borlaug has been flat. And wheat is the staff of life. Well, Raquel Chan at Biodiversity in Argentina founded a drought-resistant wheat that will hopefully bring new solutions to wheat so that wheat can increase in productivity and reduce the use of pesticides, et cetera. So I asked her, how do you describe this to people in a way that people can understand it and embrace it? And she said it simply and beautifully. And she said, it's the sunflower giving life to wheat. So when we're opposed to science and transgenics and things like that, just think of it about one organism giving life to another. And I think that's important. So agriculture is part of the solution. We've heard a little bit about soils here today. Soils are vital. Soils can be restored. They can be regenerated. We're working with Dr. Ratan Lal, who is the 2020 World Food Prize winner, on a Living Soils Initiative of the America to invest in soils, to make our policies soil-centric. Soil is like a bank account. If you take all your money out of the bank account, guess what? You don't have anything left. But if you invest in that bank account, you're going to gain interest and dividends and make money off it. And that is what we have to do in soil. We have to invest in soil. You can restore soil. You can resurrect soil. So it's important that we concentrate on soil. And as I'm speaking right now, my institute is launching a Living Soils of Africa program with Dr. Rottenlaw, with the president of Guyana, with the Minister of Agriculture of Brazil, with AGRA in Africa and many luminaries in Africa too, to hopefully take the miracle of agriculture in Brazil and do it in Africa, but do it with greater care so we don't have the problems that you discussed. I'm here in Canada. I have friends in the back here from the Canadian Cattle Association. We've talked a lot about plants, or I've talked a lot about plants, but I think we need to talk about animal agriculture too. We enjoyed some delicious animal agriculture last night. Merci beaucoup. Animals take care of soil. They're the guardians of the grassland. So I encourage you all to go to the Canadian Roundtable on Sustainable Beef and check out their link for the Guardians of the Grassland to learn how animals take care of soil, how they sequester carbon by their management of soil and pastures. 80% of agricultural land is pasture. Those animals recycle that pasture and that agricultural land that we can't grow anything on for human nutrition and protein. It's important that we all think about that. So again, I want to congratulate my friend Genevieve Parent. I can't pronounce your name well in French, pardon. But I want to congratulate you, all the sponsors, and the University of Laval, our partner, for this excellent conference, for focusing on the importance of biodiversity, of agriculture, of farmers, and of food security. Remember, this is all about food security. We have to find ways to feed people on planet Earth, and the population's growing. We can do it using science, using know-how, using farmers, and all of you to help create policies and programs that will help reward farmers, help nurture science, and help nurture our planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jay, for this presentation. I'm sure we could develop a little bit on what you said today. I think what I took is really the importance of the farmers being at the center. It's only part of the solution. I think it's the center of the solution. And science being the solution, it's also being part of the solution. And maybe something we also need to take into consideration is that science is as diverse as agriculture is. So we might also think about part of science which maybe are not, for the time being, receiving enough support. So I think that's also a question of the science, but I fully agree with you. And the one I really, because this is part of my DNA now, is your point on soil. Maybe just by saying fully agree, soil are vital. And it's good to have a program for restoration of soil, but it's even better to have programs that keep good soil good. I think that's also something quite important. But thank you again. And last but not least, coming from Switzerland, I can only support you by your reference to animals. And we have mountains. The mountains of Switzerland will be nothing without the cows and the sheep and the goats, which are feeding grass and flowers. Thank you very much. And now, maintenant, nous avons la dernière intervention. Nous avons parlé aujourd'hui.
And now the last speaker today, you mentioned the importance of farmers. Farmers are central to the solution. So now it's a pleasure to introduce and give the floor to Mr. Marcel Grolot, a farmer and president of AgriCor. The floor is yours. Hello, everyone. I'm very pleased to be able to participate in this panel and to give you my impressions on how to implement the roadmap which you developed this week. First of all, let me introduce myself. Yes, I am a farmer, but I was involved for 30 years, very substantially in the agricultural union and cooperative movement. I'm still involved as president of AgriCor, which brings together agri-agencies which do support and international assistance in nearly 50 countries, 13 agro agencies. We know very well what the issues are between the North and the South, and in particular issues of productivity and markets, and especially the huge distinction that exists between agricultural producers. I collaborated with Geneviève Caron for many years. In 2008, I believe, Geneviève, you published a book which covered the different attempts that had been made to ensure food security. It was a call for consistency, and a group of legal experts that worked on that book from more than 3 continents. So there was a huge job done there. And this is what made it possible. What Geneviève has always been interested in, how we can connect law with food security. So we always dealt with the issue of food security through economic models, but can we connect law to and the force of law, because law is a force as well, as is the economy, perhaps not as strong, but it's a force too, so as to try to solve these issues. So here we arrive with a new roadmap this morning to try to connect biodiversity and its protection and the development of agriculture in connection with better treatment of farmers to ensure food security. All of that is connected very closely. When we practice agriculture, we occupy the territory and we have an impact on biodiversity necessarily. But agriculture exists, first of all, above all, for the purpose of feeding the population. And one thing that's missing a little today is the responsibility of consumers toward that system. A lot of responsibility has been placed on the backs of farmers, but farmers are above all responding to the market forces. And market forces have been determined very clearly when we introduced agriculture to the GAP. We created a new chapter on agriculture in the WTO. And what determines the development of farming today is above all market forces than the will of farmers to do one thing or another. Market forces are pitiless. If you go to a grocery store today here in Quebec City, you'll probably find that 50 or 60% even in this time of year are products that are imported. It has changed consumer behavior, these market forces, and today we realize that market forces are pitiless when it comes to biodiversity and also hard on farmers. And I'm happy to hear that there's a will to find solutions to this situation. Farmers also participate in market forces. I participated with the World Farmers Organization in many discussions to try to find between the farmers of the world a consensus on a position toward the market. It's not easy. You have producers in the north who want to keep on exporting and want to continue developing and want to feed the planet, and you have producers in the south that want to have a space there to protect their market, and we end up with where it's hard to find a consensus. So I have arrived at the conclusion after all these years that if we don't review the economic model for food, when I say food, from production to consumption, if there's not a review of the economic model for food, then we're going to have a huge problem implementing any roadmap whatsoever regarding biodiversity and food security. I'm perhaps the one who, let's say, a bull in a china shop, as they say, according to the saying. There are all these good intentions and major declarations, but ultimately we don't change much because we don't really attack the real problem. We want to develop agriculture in Africa, let them protect their market. And the WTO has done things, major things, but it cannot be enough. The economic model in agriculture will not be enough to protect biodiversity. Someone who is hungry belly, is not concerned about biodiversity and climate change, but above all is someone looking for food. And 25% of the world population do not have enough food. So we have to make these changes. Among the changes that we need to make is better planning of farm production worldwide. We know what it requires to feed 8 billion people, but we're not planning the production. We're letting the farmers around the world determine, or at any rate, what shall I plant this year? Should I produce more? I can tell you, we all want to produce more. That's a human thing. We're the people that are in business, we all want to produce more. We don't want to produce less. And we want to produce more because often our profit margins go down year after year. And you've seen the farmers around the world this year nearly out on the streets with their tractors because the profit margins are shrinking year over year, even though they're producing more. So the model is not working anymore. And you're asking us to protect biodiversity and to change our practices and to fill out reports and to make declarations in a context where the profit margins are shrinking year after year, even though we're producing more. So we need to review the economic system on food if we want to reintroduce a roadmap that is going to ensure long-term food security and protection of biodiversity. So that's what I wanted to say today. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Grolot, for your contribution. I think it was a perfect contribution to wrap up this first round table of the panelists and to really remind us once again and to place the things in a broader context and focus on the importance of market forces and the role of market forces and the necessity to review the system or the economic model on food worldwide. So this is the kind of thing that is very difficult to put across in a forum such as FAO. I can tell you because I'm speaking from experience as a representative of a country. When you raise these kinds of questions, things tend to immediately block. And the challenge is how to raise that issue in a constructive way in order to arrive at solutions. And you have suggested some solutions, for example, the idea of having a planning of farming production at a broader level, and that there's a problem of waste as well, of course. And also, and this is another theme that is really important to us, which is the issue of distribution of the margin along the value chain. I think that the example was given of coffee. We know about that. It's not something new, but as you said very well, the margin, the final price goes up for the consumer, but the margin that goes to the producer is going down. It's not logical, but it seems logical to certain stakeholders. So thank you all the panelists. We have a little bit of time available now, and that's a little bit why we've changed things and had the presentations a bit earlier. And Braulio, I'm sorry that we didn't inform you, so we started a bit earlier, but we still have time for a few remarks. So the people in the audience may speak. I invite you to speak, and there are two aspects in particular. Do you consider that there's something we haven't raised that is essential? And I think that the last intervention, the last comments showed this. And the second question is, how do you see the appropriation of this roadmap, or the owners taking ownership of it? So the review of the economic system, or anyway, well, maybe I'll give the floor. I see already somebody asking over here. just a point that Marcel raised on the economic system. I agree with that. That is really the source of problems, and it's the source of many inequalities around the world. So if we really want to make changes at a profound way, we have to look at the economic system and the profit more than any other aspect. So we have a proposal for that too. I will come up during the question period. Another point that is very important with the WTO, there's a lot of inefficiency in the system. The WTO is telling us that any commodity crosses the border at least twice. So it crosses once in, in large quantities, and then it comes back in smaller quantities. So there's a lot that can be done with multinationals. So we talk about countries, but we're not talking about multinationals, and there's a lot they can do. There are multinationals that have a footprint bigger than some countries. So we need to set the record straight. The economic record is too difficult, but it's one of the factors that we have to talk about and clarify. So all along the value chain, there are many studies at FAO that say that in most values of chain, they're getting longer and longer. Instead of getting shorter, we're making them longer. And this is a point to be discussed and to look into. These are really essential changes that are going to require everyone to work together, the FAO, the CGIAR, the governments, and different stakeholders, and farmers too, of course. Thank you. I see someone over here with a question at the right. At my right, you have the floor. Gérald Larose, Caisse Communale Solidaire Desjardins, which is a member and partner of the Coalition to Feed Humanity Sustainably. I wish to congratulate the organizers and all of the process. It's perhaps the first time, at least for my part, that I've seen all of the connections being made between biodiversity, the forestry dimension, the question of the farmers, and so on, and with a roadmap that is very interesting. But extending what Marcel Groslo has just said to us, in my opinion, in order to give a real substance to the action, there are two questions that we have to come back to, and they can be suggestions for the future conferences. And I had raised this in one of the workshops. There's the question of the land. And I think that in our case, it's quite clear. I think that in a number of countries, it's the case. As long as the land is seen as an asset submitted to market rules, and that farmers, in particular the succession, are caught up having to purchase this asset at a very heavy price, then there's an extraordinary kind of taxation that occurs. Excuse me, but to give the most possible people to speak, could I ask you to please limit your concept? Okay, coming back to two themes. We have to have a symposium on how to take the land off the market in order to free up the production from costs that go into the pocket of speculators. And the second theme Marcel raised is the fundamental right to food. So, and the coalition has a project on that, which is an international convention where this right would be superior to all other, or take precedence over other economic rights. I think that then we would have a very good subject for a future symposium. Thank you very much. It's duly noted, the right to food as a theme for a future event. To my left, please introduce yourself and try to be brief in your remarks so that as many people as possible can participate. Marie Sade, I'm at University of Laval and study agriculture in Quebec. And through your comments, you explained how much science has a lot of power in politics and to what extent scientists, in fact, I don't know how to manage that power, and we need not to forget that all sciences taken together, natural sciences, social sciences, and so on. So I believe that jointly or upstream, ahead of deciding what is important for people around the world, perhaps we ought to think of decolonizing research. There are scientists who are looking into this Often they're the poor cousins of research in some cases. Unfortunately, those people have already been able to show to what extent by decolonizing research, we're going to be able to, it's going to assist us in going above and beyond what is in fact underlying the system of governance that is at the origin of this entire biodiversity crisis. So I think that if you can respond, I'd like to get more information on that. Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll take a series of questions. I see 4 more, so I think with those 4 here, and then perhaps we'll have a quick round table and conclude. Yes, over to you. Thank you. Pierre Lampron, second Vice President, Canadian Federation of Agriculture. I think we've had a good week, and everyone, I find it positive. I think we all want the same thing. How to achieve it, we have to work together. How can we work together? As you know, it's not easy to do. In a couple, it's always better with 2, but it's not even in there. In the farm, we have 4 brothers plus my son, and we are able to achieve big things, but it's not easy to collaborate. But today we have an even greater challenge, working together. I find that the roadmap that we've worked on, that's going to be improved even more. We need to work together. We need to have the tools, and this roadmap is a good tool for working together to achieve that. On our part, the Canadian Federation of Agriculture represents 190 family farms. We have small farms and bigger farms, and everyone wants the same thing in biodiversity and durability. It's been said, it's important. It's the environment, the economic environment of these farmers we have to live on, and socially too. I think that farmers are proud. We want to be part of a community in Canada and around the world, and not have the money go to tax havens, but keep it at home to help the economy. We're going to work in Canada in our organization to try to get as many people on board as possible with this roadmap. We work with the World Farmers Organization too. So on our side, we're going to do what we can, but I think everybody can work together to chip in. We all want the same thing, pass on to our children and future generations this planet in good health. Thank you. Thank you. Hello, Brigitte Laliberté. I work in the value chain of cocoa. And one thing I would like to encourage is to talk a lot more about traceability, because I believe that traceability gives not only visibility to farmers, but also it generates information that goes above and beyond indicators, because we have complex issues which quickly need to be answered. And with that, we can manage a lot of data now. We don't need to simplify with regard to data, and we want to look at traceability more clearly in the roadmap. And as regards to farmers, I would like to suggest that rather than putting them at the center, which can be one way of visualizing it with a lot of pressure on them, to put them at the head of it, at the top, and let them manage things and let them and have systems that support them in the decisions that they need to make in what they manage for us and for future generations. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the reference to traceability also, and to reposition things in a more, I would say, in a way that's closer to reality for farmers. Over to you. Yes, Jean-Louis Rastoin, professor at the Montpellier Agronomic Institute, UNESCO chair for Feeding the World. I was very impressed by what's been said. First of all, Ms. Elouafi and Marcel Groslot. Ms. Elouafi was courageous enough to tell us that there is too much food. There's a 3,000 calories per person produced in the world today. So the big problem is disparity. Some die of hunger and others are at 4,000 kilocalories. So we need to regulate all this. And the absolute priority is food sovereignty, as indicated by Via Campesina. We need to increase food autonomy in countries that are not producing enough. So this has an impact, as Marcel had the courage to say, an impact on world trade, obviously. And we need to, he talks about economic planning. I think it's very courageous, of course. But let's talk instead about economic regulation. Fewer markets, or less market and more state intervention. We need instruments of regulation of markets that were recommended by many international conferences. Market regulation means that we tax those who produce negative externalities, as in the agro-industrial model, and we move toward a socio-ecological transition. What we've heard here is very encouraging in that direction. So my suggestion for the next symposium is to broaden this to all of the food chain. Thank you for that suggestion, which fits in logically as a follow-up with this symposium. Yes. Thank you very much. I'll be speaking English.
I'm the officer in charge of climate, nature, and biodiversity at the World Farmers Organization. And I really appreciate to be here, like in a group of friends. I know many of you like have had interaction like with the WFO over the years. We've worked together. We talk about work to do together, and I would like to say like this conference as a, how to say, as a first step like to have a more structured like cooperation like together, like also in the areas of nature and biodiversity. Marcel, like he mentioned last year, like the WFO tried to work out the miracle by bringing together like farmers like from our membership, 81 farmers organizations from 55 countries, and make them agree, like help them to reach a consensus around what do they need from the trade system, international trade system. And there all the farmers, they show they were able to reach a common understanding of how like a international trade system that works for farmers would look like. And this year we will try to work out the miracle again, like to try like to bring farmers together like from all over the world, like, and discussing like how they want to approach all this conversation on nature and biodiversity at the WFO General Assembly in June in Rome, hosted at the FAO headquarters. And I really hope that the discussions that we have had in these days can feed into the conversations that the farmers will have. Farmers, I heard it many times like over the past 2 days, like, and I hope what I'm saying now like is that as the WFO receive a mandate from its members to participate in this conversation, farmers are committed to be part of this conversation. Now the question is, how much are the other actors committed to have farmers as part of this conversation? Mm-hmm. This means speaking the language of the farmers. This means going down to the level of the farmers, going down to what needs to be done at the farm level and the kind of incentives they need to have, and leverage on the experiences of the farmers at the farm level. We all are global organization, but we also have national members. How can we coordinate better the discussion that we're having up here with actions that needs to be taken at the national level? We are here happy to work together, like under these conditions, I would say. Like, and if I may say, thank you, Genevieve, and thank you like, to the organizer like, for bringing us together and make us feel, in a way, part of the room. Like all the farmers are part of the room on the same level as the others. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And we clearly see at least a possible role for the roadmap in the preparation of your next conference in June in FAO. Now, what I suggest, we will make I see one but very short intervention. Une dernière intervention, mais très courte, parce que là,
One last intervention, but very short, because after that we'll conclude. So thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I come from Cameroon. Assistance with No Frontiers organization. My contribution goes as follows. We should also include education in the school system of the South. It is important to talk about these things because the decisions made up north, the children are really those who will face the challenges of the future. And it is very important to think about education. Thank you very much. We can applaud this suggestion, and it's quite evident. I wonder how we could have forgotten it in the roadmap. Thank you very much. Now, what I think we should do, we'll go back to the panelists. You all have 1 minute for the final message from left to right. The last word will be for the representative of the farmers. So go ahead.
So many issues. One is the issue of land that several spoke about. We have a problem in many parts of the world because of the property inheritance system in each country. So property size are getting smaller and smaller by each generation, to the extent that it becomes impossible to produce sustainably and with a good profit. I visit some countries in Africa. There's in some places, the average size of a farm is half an hectare. That's not possible. That's not possible to be a good producer in a sustainable way. We need to change that. That's difficult, but we need to face that kind of issue.
Merci beaucoup, Braulio.
Thank you very much, Braulio. Now the floor is yours, Eliane. One message.
I just want to highlight the critical importance of evidence and evidence-based approaches and decision-making tools. We've talked about data, but it's how do we take the data that is available to us and really make it into actionable ways of moving forward that incorporate farmers, the micro farmers that you're talking about. How do we bring them together in ways that leverage innovative financial instruments that really goes from the bottom up? Because it's not just about how do we look at local markets, but it's like how do we look at the financing that the farmers have access to towards that transition? And how are we looking at finance not only in terms of productivity, but how do we leverage carbon and biodiversity credits for smallholder farmers in particular for really accelerating a nature positive way forward? And in that sense, how do we create the enabling position for policy actors in their efforts to integrate the biodiversity agenda into agriculture and the forestry sectors, as well as climate action? So bringing ministries of agriculture and ministries of environment together, because the financial mechanisms to unlock right now are under the ministries of environments around the world. We know that this is an ambitious agenda. It will take strong partnerships, and we look forward at C4 Aircraft to participating at the way forward. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Eliane. Kent?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kent. Now?
Okay, so 2 points.
Ah,
One. Okay. Well, that one is a general message that we've been talking about sustainability. We've been talking about resilience. By definition, those two concepts entail diversity, because any system that has to be that will be sustainable or that is resilient must be diverse, no matter at what level. Whether it's an economic system, if you rely only on one product, you're vulnerable and you'll collapse. But any shock will collapse the system, whether it is at the species level, whether it's a genetic level. So diversity is a very central aspect of resilience as well as sustainability. So that is something we need to work on and ensure that we don't lose that diversity. Then going to the roadmap, we know that the map is not the territory. We have to look at how we are going to facilitate the transition from what we're talking about here, the paper that we have in front of us, to real action on the ground. That is the major step that we need to take now. We have very good ideas, wonderful ideas, but then it's a question of translating that into action. so that we don't pay lip service to what we're saying about how we value the farmers, how they are the fantastic people, how they entail our survival, but actually have to take the actions when it comes to, you know, or when they said the tire hits the road. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken. Man.
Merci François et j'aimerais bien terminer
Thank
avec
you, Francois. I would like to finish with solutions precisely. I think many colleagues said that there's a lot of science, a lot of innovation. There are solutions. There are some indeed, and we must implement them. When I went around the centers, I saw new potatoes with 5 times more iron. I saw low G rice. I saw some tilapia that produce more. There are many solutions, but science is there. It goes forward. We must use it and we must invest in it. Perenniality. In the past, we made a anti-perenniality selection. Now we think about it much more for rice, wheat, etc. The other point is solution regarding funding, as we had talked about. Now we have $800 billion in subsidies. And in the last 30 years, all the banks, including the World Bank, the UN, pushed the southern countries to change their subsidies, but not in the northern countries. We must change subsidies throughout the world. $800 billion could be the money that we need to push sustainability and also for resilience that we talked about. So solutions should not be partisan. They must be global, equal, and they must help us to diminish disequalities, because if we do not fight the disequalities, we'll go nowhere. Thank you. Thank you very much, Lloyd.
Oublié, oh, excusez-moi,
Oh,
Janice.
sorry, Janice first. I forgot Janice. Sorry, Janice, go right ahead.
So I wanted to, again, and this is Lloyd who said this earlier this week, we need to embrace science, echoing what we've just said, but all types of science, natural sciences and engineering, social sciences and health sciences, to provide data and carry out research, provide data for better policies by our decision makers, as well as better technologies. This science will lead us, hopefully, and I'm very anxious to listen to Mr. Grelot, because also we need a whole new system of world commerce. That's got to change. Food security and even animal welfare in terms of agriculture, it shouldn't be under the same kind of world markets as other non-living commodities. So that's one thing, but I also wanted to say something. We have to embrace science, and this is maybe a little bit controversial, but for 60 years, scientists have been telling the world that the climate is changing.
Mm-hmm.
For 30, 40 years, people have been talking about the biodiversity crisis. And it's now that we're starting to hear about it more frequently. Society needs to be engaged in these crises right now so that they can understand and actually take actions. So one thing that was mentioned on the roadmap was the concept of One Health. So even though we're here talking about agriculture, and we all understand here the importance of the soil microbiome to the gut microbiome to the water microbiome, I really think in terms of moving forward, and I don't really like this, but I think it's just the smart thing to do, is if we put human health at the center of this whole crisis, of this whole issue, I think that we might get better buy-in from our funders, the politicians. So I think that maybe human health has to have a slightly bigger role in the next discussion.
Thank you very much, Janice. Lloyd, now.
Thank you. So there's an old saying, it's keep it simple. So I have 3 premises that you all heard. And so I want audience participation. So number 1 is your turn. We've heard it here. No, number 1's farmers. Number 2, Science. Science is the foundation for public policy. We heard it here. Science of all kind. As Janice just said, science from gene engineering to organic. I was approached by someone to say, I heard you talk about gene editing. We need to talk about organics too. That's fine. Organics does good things to take care of the soil and the water and other things. Science of all kind. And the third, thank you, John Charles, but you can't participate. But agriculture is part of the solution to our climate challenges, to our food security challenges, to everything. Agriculture is part of the solution. So number one, number two, number three, solution. There you go. Thank you very much. Please, for those of you here in Canada, if you want to work with the ICA and try to help us contribute to what we're doing as the University of Laval, as the World Farmers Organization, as the Canadian Cattlemen, as Marcel and others, please contact Jean-Charles Develay. I butcher his name too, Genevieve. Thank you very much for having us here, and we look forward to continuing on this journey with you to help achieve our food security and our environmental goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcel.
Oui, bon, alors j'ai le dernier mot.
The last word, okay, Marcel? No, Geneviève will have the last word. First, the farmer and agriculture are the most vulnerable aspects of the food chain. We are constrained by seasons. We have to work with the nature, with animal cycles, and we put on the market perishable products that have to be processed. So our power of negotiation in the food chain is low. Farmers or agriculture is ill adapted to the market economy because we don't have much power. We cannot stop or slow production. We cannot accelerate the production. So we are vulnerable. That is why the system of the market forces are so dire for us. What the research chair has studied is the possibility of a convention to nourish sustainably, where we take these all these elements into account, where we want to assure food safety of food of quality and good quantity for all, where we want all country to be responsible first to feed its population, and where trade becomes a tool for food safety instead of a goal and such, where we can assure perennity of businesses with a place for the youth. So we have to look at all of this all together. We have a tool to discuss these solutions. It is the Convention on Nourishing the Humanity Sustainably. Should we review the WTO rules? Should the FAO have a bigger role? In order to, with a convention similar to that one, all possibilities are there on the table. We have to look at the food situation as a whole and not only in economic terms. Thank you very much. I think I could not hope for a better conclusion for this discussion. So I thank all of you panelists for this very deep discussion. It was very impressive. And I pass the floor now to the Master of Ceremony for the next phase. I think you can go back to your seats if you want. Yes, I think indeed that we can agree with Mr. Pitou that we have really been witnesses of a very impressive event. Thank you, Mr. Pitou, for this last very interesting first round of reaction to the roadmap and to have proposed possibilities for its implementation. But after 2 days of discussion, after everything that we have heard, the final word should be given to Geneviève Parent, who maybe could say a few things on the follow-up. And if we have a few minutes after that, maybe we can have a few comments from the room. So first, in order to continue with the issues of trade and the search for a better balance between the commercial consideration and other consideration, environmental and also social. I see in the room my colleague Sophia Mercy. Maybe you can add a few things, Sophia, but she also works on a project that really reflects on these issues. I know there'll be a meeting in Geneva at beginning of September. I don't know if it's possible to have people from abroad or farmers, but maybe you can take a few minutes to talk about it because it's a very passionate issue. Thank you, Geneviève. Just to say, it is a 3-year project funded in part by the Swiss government in association with the University of Bern and the National Institute for Sustainable Development, a Canadian NPO with an office in Geneva. So for now, it is still being discussed. The meeting in September will regroup the partners of the project, but in the year to come, we hope to have a draft of a convention that will look at the basic principles as to what we would like to have there, as to how we could set up a more equitable and more sustainable relation. I think you'll hear about it. We'll have the participation of Geneviève, and we'll be linking up with this organization in 2025. I think we'll have something very strong to share with the rest of the world. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sophia. Yes. I think it deserves a man of applause indeed. Yes, I have only a few notes. I have little voice left, but still I want to talk on behalf of the steering committee and my two co-chairs to say to what extent we are grateful for the exchanges that you have proposed and made possible here. We have organized this conference in very little time, 6 months, all in all. We had big objectives after month. Well, we had moments where we were wondering if we would make it, but I think, yes, we have reached our objectives. First of this objective was to offer a space where we could really have a constructive construction with the majority of participants, farmers, and I think we have reached that. As we have said, it is important, I think, to repeat it. In the room, we had 30% of farmers present, coming from 39 countries. So it's quite impressive. So I would like to thank all participants, in particular those who had to go through difficult and long processes to get their visas. So thank you very much for this tenacity, and thank you for all farmers who have trusted us and to have come with maybe with a little bit of reticence and to have finally accepted to be part and parcel of this exercise, to discuss, to tell us about your challenges, your good shots, and your proposal for solutions. Second objective that we had was the roadmap. And very humbly, we shared it with you this morning. Also very humbly, we are working on this since the outset. It is a process, interesting process that we had for this roadmap. When it was submitted at the SN forum for consultation. We didn't know what to expect, and finally we got very positive and constructive answers. And I look at my colleagues from FAO, we were the second most popular consultation that received most comments in the history of the forum. So we were very happy of that. And the discussions we had in the past days show clearly that the success of this meeting, well, probably it is simply because this meeting met a need. And I think, yes, clearly, we might be tired, and the efforts that the organizers, the government of Quebec and others have dedicated to this for the whole symposium to work well was worth it. And the energy was that we felt throughout the 3 days in the room is really reflects the need for this discussion. And we really needed to have this meeting. So I'd like to go back to our humility, the roadmap, what we did clearly, quote unquote. I look at Julie, Agnès, Linda, who all worked continuously in the past month, up to late last night and early this morning, to translate as best as possible the essence of the discussions that we've had, on top of the consultation of the SSN forum and the UPA forum on agro-diversity. Maybe it's not the right title, but anyway, it's a roadmap that clearly, as you have said, could be fine-tuned, but the idea there, the objective we had was to transmit the essence of the discussions, but mainly to have a document that could allow us to link the discourse of the organizations to the reality of the ground. And this is the document we have now. The colleagues working in these organizations, the FAO, the Secretariat, tended to say, it's not enough, we have to add known expressions. And I'm sure some farmers that I know will say the document is still not simple enough, it has to be simplified. But see it as a in-between, as a compromise, but mainly as an opening to the discussions that we wish will be continued. The steering committee and myself, our wish is that you make this document yours, because it is yours to every one of us. You can improve it, you can concentrate on what is more pertinent for you, but it is a tool that really belongs to you, and a tool that will allow you, if you really want to go forward, if you want to go open the door that we started to open to, if you want to open it even more, well, work at the national and international levels, and work with your country, working to implement to the global framework, and also use it as a tool. I can't mention it. I call you Kent, but Mr. Nagozi, there we go, has said that the map is not the territory, it is a roadmap. We hope it'll be yours, so you can go back on the ground and you can start improving the practices that you already implement. So that's about it. Maybe we could say that that we hope we'll have the energy and the funding to end up with a simplified document, a simpler document. But for now, I think we have together accomplished a very good work with this roadmap, very simple as it is. So I would like to thank a few persons, if that is possible. I have the microphone. I won't have it afterwards, so I would like to thank a few persons. Very rapidly, I hope I won't forget anyone, but it is very important because such an event, as you know, it takes a lot of time, many people, a lot of energy, and tremendous will and passion to organize. So I would like to thank the participants, the panelists, and the co-facilitators, in particular farmers and those who have done so much work to get their visas to be here in person. We mentioned them at the beginning, but I'd like to thank not the partners, financial partners for this event, and first and foremost, the Department of International Affairs and Francophonie, which has allowed the Superior School for International Studies to hold this event of tremendous magnitude, and that will have consequences of great importance for the whole sector. I would like to thank all members of the steering committee, in particular Linda Collette, who really carried this out tremendously. We have met every week, and we had no choice. Linda was there every week, made us work in between each of these meetings since June. Every week we met. At some point, we actually thought that we would have a tremendous postpartum after all of that. Thank you so much. Thank you to the head of the school, Jonathan Paquin. Your presence really was a breeze of fresh air, and without your presence, this event could not have been carried out. Thank you to the school of the school. They were present in all sessions. They took notes and they helped us preparing all the documents. Thank you to the deans of the Faculty of Agriculture, Food, Mr. Doin and Madame Laflamme, Dean of the Faculty of Law, Madame Campana, Dean of Faculty of Social Science. Thank you for your daily support for the organization of this event. And thank you also to the steering committee. I don't know where they are. They are here. I think we must applaud them. Yes, please, a hand of applause for the committee. So, under the supervision of Marie-Claude Galland, a small committee, but so efficient. Janie, Catherine, Sophie, I don't know where they are. Yeah, here they are. Thank you so much. Without you, in particular, we would not be here today. So these are my thanks. Thank you to the chair and vice chair, those who were there in 2 sessions. Thank you all. The next symposium, well, what to say? I would like to thank the producers who said that they will go back home with the roadmap under their arm. We wish we'll go forward with that, and we hear all these good ideas for the next topic for the next symposium. We'll go back to it, but as Mr. Koulibaly has said, we cannot go home and just stay things put. We have go forward, starting with COP16. Thank you very much.
Merci Geneviève Parent. Alors, toute bonne chose a une fin. Nous y sommes arrivés.
Thank you, Geneviève Parent. All good things must come to an end. So I'm going to go ahead to find the people who are going to tell us the last words. I'll call you up one by one. So I'll start with Jonathan Paquin, who will represent the University, Université Laval. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to see you again this morning. We have already arrived at the end of this international symposium. So first of all, I would like to acknowledge the presence of Neil Pratt, Acting Director of the Division of Implementation of the Secretariat on the Convention on Biological Diversity, and Céline Agréan, who is a member for Laval des Rapides and Parliamentary Assistant for the Department of International Relations and La Francophonie, member of the National Assembly. This international symposium, of course, emphasized the importance of an interdisciplinary approach to research on major international issues of concern to us. The symposium reminded us that it's almost impossible to deal with food insufficiency, hunger, malnutrition, and underfinancing of food production, loss of natural habitat, and overexploitation of resources without sharing and expertise and without accelerating this sharing. More than ever, we need to break down the disciplinary silos, to use a word that comes from the agricultural field once again, silos. So it's the Institute of Higher Learning on International Studies that talked about accelerating this. And in this regard, I think that our symposium has no doubt provided an excellent contribution of an interdisciplinary nature since Tuesday morning. And there are some numbers that I'd like to reiterate: more than 250 participants and experts from 39 different countries and from many different disciplines represented, and also 30% farmers who engaged in the discussion, debate, and conversation on the good practices for food security, biodiversity, and agriculture. Congratulations to one and all. It's remarkable. In conclusion, I don't want to take too much time. I wish to warmly thank Geneviève Parent, who is the person behind the ideas of this convention, this symposium, and one of the architects of the symposium, and has worked very hard. And I've seen how professional she has been over the last months, and it's been a pleasure to work with you, Geneviève, in organizing this symposium. Hats off. I would also like to thank our partners who are very important. First of all, the Convention on Biological Diversity, the UN Organization for Food and Agriculture, and in conclusion, but not the least, the Government of Quebec, and in particular, the Department of International Relations and La Francophonie, with whom we collaborate and have done for some time, and with which we carry on the implementation of these major international conferences that we have been able to organize, the one today and that will be coming in the coming years on various topics. Partnership with the Department of International Relations of Quebec has been very valuable, and I wish to emphasize that. And we are pleased to be able to count on this department with the presence of representatives that are very constructive and visionary as well, and that contribute in their own way to the development of our school. And I wish to thank them very warmly for their support. Unflagging support towards the school is very much appreciated. Thank you to the Ministère des Relations Internationales et de la Francophonie, MRIF. I also wish to thank, and I would repeat this as Ms. Parent said earlier, thank you to the teams, those who are working behind the scenes that we've been carrying on since Tuesday, that contributed, that did a remarkable job, as has already been pointed out. First of all, the administrative team of the International Studies School, hats off. The management of communications in Laval University, ladies, hats off to you. And that being said, thank you to all. And this brings us to the end of the symposium. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Paquin. And now, on behalf of the Secretariat on the Convention on Biological Diversity, Mr. Neil Pratt, please come up to the front.
Thanks very much. So, co-chairs, colleagues, very distinguished participants, I'm very honored to provide a few closing remarks on behalf of the Convention on Biological Diversity. I'd like to start by sincerely thanking the Government of Quebec for the very generous support that has allowed the symposium to bring together people from all around the world for this very important discussion on the role of agriculture in the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. I'd like to congratulate the organizing committee and the scientific committee for their tireless work that has led to the clear success of this symposium and its genuine outcomes. In that regard, I'd also like to thank our partners in this, the Government of Quebec, the University of Laval, for its intense work and for hosting us, and the Food and Agriculture Organization that since the establishment of the convention has been such an important partner. And most of all, I'd like to give our sincere thanks to all the participants who have come from around the world and dedicated their time and thought to this symposium and the very important outcome of this roadmap. The conclusions of the 3 days of very intense discussions are very encouraging. The Global Biodiversity Plan is human-centered and based on a human rights approach. And to succeed in its implementation, it needs a whole of government as well as a whole of society approach and action. So we've been particularly pleased to see the participation of farmers and farmers' organizations, representatives of the ministries of agriculture, and other stakeholders that are not traditionally part of the usual constituencies of the convention. And we've also been very pleased to see a genuinely whole of government approach to this symposium and this discussion, including subnational governments and the great leadership in that respect from the province of Quebec. The global food system is facing multiple challenges. People are still suffering from hunger or malnutrition. And our current production and consumption patterns exert a very heavy toll on the environment while dealing with the profound impacts of climate change. The conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity is fundamental for addressing these challenges. And the ambitious Global Biodiversity Plan can support countries and stakeholders in setting targets and implementing action to halt biodiversity loss and provide solutions to multiple challenges. It is essential to integrate biodiversity considerations into the policies and actions on climate change, land degradation, water scarcity, and the mitigation of natural disasters. We need to address all these issues together with one another and accelerate a transition towards a much more sustainable food system. And this symposium has brought together farmers, governments, civil society organizations, researchers, policymakers, and international organizations together to share views on priority actions. The work carried out here to develop a roadmap
to facilitate the implementation of the biodiversity plan by the agricultural sector is instrumental and very timely. The future of biodiversity depends on this, and food security depends on biodiversity. Going forward, I hope we can together commit to continuing to work together with all of society to promote equity and food security while living in harmony with nature. And just listening to the wrap-up discussion, we've heard great reflections on this, including, for the next symposium. And I very much hope that many of you can also join us at COP16 in Cali in October, which will be a very important opportunity and forum to bring the action plan forward. And with that, I would just like to again sincerely thank you for all your participation and great work, and thank you for your attention to these closing remarks. Thanks very much.
Alors, merci beaucoup, Monsieur Platt. Et maintenant, au nom
Thank
du
you very much, Mr. Pratt. And now on behalf of the MRIF, Ministère des Relations Internationales et la Francophonie of the Quebec government, I would ask Ms. Céline Atayan to venir to come and say a few closing remarks. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, good afternoon. I'm very pleased to be with you for the conclusion of this International Symposium of Agriculture, Biodiversity, and Food Security, from commitments to actions. I thank the co-organizers who were able to ensure the success of this symposium, the Carrefour International of Laval University, the UN Organization for Food and Agriculture, FAO, and the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity. I also wish to congratulate all the participants who contributed to the discussion over these past days. December 19, 2022, the UN Conference on Biodiversity concluded by the historic adoption of the World Framework on Biodiversity, Kunming, Montreal. This agreement aims to coordinate efforts to halt and reverse the loss of biodiversity by 2030 and to place natural environments toward reestablishment by 2050. And this is a good success of environmental diplomacy, which contributes to what is being done here in Quebec and outside the country. And the theme of this convention, the implementation of the Kunming Montreal Global Biological Framework, focuses on all economic sectors, agriculture, and food as well. This ambitious framework has several targets, specifically focused on the field of agriculture and the resiliency of farmland. This symposium aimed to develop a technical roadmap to implement the KMGBF by decompartmentalizing these different sectors, including food security and biosecurity. So I hope that all these discussions will be important to stakeholders in the agricultural field to bring in suitable measures into their environments, both in Quebec and internationally. I'm very proud also that this important international symposium took place here in Quebec City, where the FAO was founded in 1945. The choice of Quebec City to hold this international strategic meeting shows its leadership role in fighting against climate change and protection of biodiversity and food security for all. We assure you that Quebec will continue to play a key role at the international level on the protection of the environment. Quebec will once again raise its voice at COP16 that will take place in Colombia, in Cali, and biodiversity and food security are among the major issues that affect everyone. It is our collective responsibility to future generations. The global framework of Kunming Montreal on biodiversity sets ambitious goals, and now it's up to all of us to take action. Thank you for your commitment. Have a good day. Thank you very much, Ms. Atayan. I hope I pronounce your name well. Now we will turn to Colombia by video, and we have Ms. Jennifer Mayuca Flores, Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development of Colombia, by video.
Estoy mandando este mensaje hasta Canadá desde Putumayo, que es una de las regiones nuestras que hacen parte del bioma amazónico, en el que compartimos con varios países de América del Sur esta enorme responsabilidad de soportar una acción climática universal a partir de una gobernanza ejercida con comunidades locales, campesinas, pescadoras, pueblos indígenas, comunidades negras que hacen parte de esta enorme diversidad cultural que es tan extraordinaria como la biodiversidad de este bioma amazónico. Quisiera decirles que este simposio internacional sobre la agricultura, la biodiversidad y la seguridad alimentaria, de los compromisos a las acciones, es de suma importancia. Hubiese querido estar con ustedes presencialmente, pero nos encontramos aquí también en un momento decisivo en la defensa de nuestro gobierno del cambio, presidido por el presidente Gustavo Petro, en donde estamos haciendo unas apuestas por la transformación de la manera en cómo desarrollamos nuestra agricultura, nuestra economía, nuestra ordenación territorial y políticas de restauración de ecosistemas importantes como este, a partir de las acciones de gobernanza con comunidades locales. Colombia quiere ser líder en generar una seguridad alimentaria y un abastecimiento a partir del privilegio de las prácticas de la agricultura familiar, campesina y comunitaria, a partir de las prácticas gastronómicas, de la alimentación local, de esos ciclos cortos de comercialización y de producción, de ese aprovechamiento de los alimentos del entorno de manera sostenible y con el compromiso de las comunidades que lo practican. Políticas de reforma agraria, de compras de tierras, de ordenamiento territorial son fundamentales y es nuestra apuesta para poder privilegiar la vida y la protección de los ecosistemas, pero de la mano de las comunidades locales. Igualmente, hacer inversiones y finanzas públicas subsidiadas orientadas a la descarbonización de la agricultura, a las prácticas de la agroecología, a las prácticas de los bioinsumos, las biofábricas y todas estas iniciativas de producción orgánica y ecológica sustentable que surjan de las mismas prácticas comunitarias. Y fundamentalmente en contextos como este en el que nos encontramos, de una enorme riqueza y exuberancia y biodiversidad. Esta vez Colombia será sede de la COP16 y nuestro lema, paz con la naturaleza, sintetiza esto que queremos inspirar en este gran, importante paso que están desarrollando en Canadá. Los invitamos. En agosto tendremos la precumbre preparatoria de la COP16, en donde recogeremos apuestas de distintas organizaciones campesinas, ya que hemos convocado conjuntamente entre el gobierno nacional, las organizaciones de la vía campesina, de las luchas internacionales por la tierra para el cuidado del planeta, desde las prácticas de la agricultura familiar campesina, la agroecología y toda la ciencia, innovación y tecnología para hacer que podamos dar esos pasos trascendentales en acciones climáticas que logren alimentar al mundo, dar seguridad alimentaria, dar seguridad nutricional a partir de la preservación de la biodiversidad. Colombia está en condiciones de demostrarle al mundo que es posible todo esto que se ha venido discutiendo en distintos escenarios universales sobre cómo hacer la transformación de nuestros sistemas agroalimentarios. Colombia está avanzando en figuras de ordenamiento territorial, como las zonas de reserva campesina. Aquí en el Putumayo hay una en donde se preservan grandes extensiones de tierra de común acuerdo con comunidades que planifican su territorio y sus nociones de desarrollo, no con un desarrollo capitalista o con un desarrollo externo, sino a partir de una noción de unos planes de vida y desarrollo sostenible. Estas apuestas, junto con la protección del suelo rural, especialmente de los suelos más ricos, a partir de áreas de protección para la producción agroalimentaria, la ordenación de cuerpos de tierra inundables, de playones, de sabanas, de ciénagas, de páramos, de playas, de islas, a partir de decisiones de los gobiernos que permitan proteger el curso del agua y hacer que estas comunidades que pueden convivir con la naturaleza por sus prácticas tradicionales de agricultura puedan ser una realidad. Nosotros decimos ser que un gobierno que propicia una Colombia potencia de la vida, porque no es posible en un mundo en crisis climática seguir con un esquema económico y de desarrollo, seguir con un esquema de agricultura que no propicie la protección de la vida. Y la vida es una sola, una misma vida, la vida de la tierra, la vida de los océanos, la vida del territorio, del agua, de la biodiversidad y la vida de quienes trabajan la tierra y nos ayudan a alimentarnos.
Colombia, potencia de la vida.
Alors maintenant, toujours en vidéo,
And
on
so now, again by video, we turn to Rome, to the head office of the FAO, where Mr. Kaveh Zaidi, who is director of the Climate Change and Biodiversity and Environment Bureau, will say some closing remarks on behalf of Ms. Maria Elena Semedo, who is assistant director of the organization.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor to join our partners for closing this international symposium on behalf of FAO Deputy Director General Maria Helena Semedo. The exchanges have been rich and resulted in a roadmap that shows the way forward to ensure integration of the agricultural sectors, particularly putting farmers at the center in the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. This framework, hailed as historic when it was adapted at COP15 here in Montreal, recognizes the key role of agriculture in ensuring the sustainable management of biodiversity. It cannot succeed without the full involvement of all stakeholders in agriculture. We must now ensure support for the transition to sustainable agri-food systems. And this transition will not be possible without increased investment in sustainable agriculture and the active commitment of governments. Based on the roadmap that emerged from this symposium, this is the message that FAO will take forward in the run-up to COP16, when all countries will be asked to present their national biodiversity strategies and action plans. To conclude, I would like to again express my deep gratitude to the Government of Quebec for our close collaboration on such interdependent issues as food security, biodiversity, and climate change. A collaboration that we hope to strengthen with the integration of biodiversity in agricultural sectors along the lines of the successful SAGA project. Many thanks also to the Université of Laval and the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity for co-organizing this symposium with us. Finally, I would like to thank all the speakers and participants for their engagement, which has made this roadmap possible. In closing, allow me to reaffirm once again that for FAO, sustainable agriculture depends on biodiversity, and biodiversity must remain a safety net for farmers. These two agendas are inseparable, and we are committed to working with partners to enhance biodiversity and sustainability in agriculture. Thank you very much.
Alors voilà qui termine officiellement ce
So
colloque.
that officially closes our three-day symposium. Without repeating it, I wish to join with all the thanks that have been put forward today. And I would also like to specifically thank all the stakeholders and participants who followed us with so much commitment and so assiduously. And I think we still see the online participants. I would like to conclude by reminding you that the roadmap is available online on the website of the symposium, as is the WillClap app, which is still open, and you may continue to add comments, make suggestions, or ask questions. So since we're talking about applications, I'd like to conclude with a very manual app, which I will call Clap Clap, in order to thank everyone who was involved. Thank you.